am talking with James Willems, one half of the team for the new audio video podcast. It's called Wrestling with the Week. You're going to be co-hosting with AEW superstar Scorpio Sky. That was a tongue twister. A lot of S's. Mm-hmm. James and Scorpio Sky their show's going to premiere on Monday, January 18th. You can check it out online. From what I've seen so far, it looks like a lot of fun. It's not just about wrestling. It's, you get into sneakerhead fandom and life, and it looks fun. It's timely and topical. So just, can you talk about, how you guys linked up and what your expectations are for the first week of the show?
Absolutely. Wrestling with the Week, it's really hard to put into this like perfect PR pitch, because it is kind of two different worlds coming together. Sky and I are very, very different people, but I think we've come from places that are similar. So I've been working with Rooster Teeth for as long as I have. I've been pushing them. I'm like, we have to work with wrestling. We have to get into the wrestling world. I, as a fan, just myself, like, it's so different, but it's so similar. What we do is you have these personalities. They're like enhanced, larger than life kind of personalities, and a lot of community enthusiasm over those personalities. And the same happens when you look across into wrestling, and they seem so different, but kind of what we do is similar. And it just happened that an opportunity showed up that we could work with AEW to do something. And the best possible fit was to take someone from our world, me essentially, and take someone who's entrenched in that world in a similar way, and then put them in the same room, and then just have them like hash things out. And that's that kind of, that explosion, that kinetic energy is kind of what the show is essentially. So
I know Scorpio did an interview with Bleacher Report a few weeks ago, and he said that you guys were total strangers heading into it. So I thought that was an interesting dynamic, because it kind of, goes with your point of putting people that don't have much in common. In this case, you don't have any relationship before you start, and really just, I think that's a cool element. And yeah, I think the dynamic's going to be interesting, because we're so used to hearing about his love of wrestling, and I know a little bit about his background, but you guys, it feels like a teachable element, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. It was partially a one-way street, because I was familiar with Sky. I've gone to a ton of Southern California wrestling shows and everything. So I've seen him wrestle. He doesn't realize this, but I have been feet away from him as he's suicide diving over a top rope, like through basically like onto my friends. And so I'm definitely aware of like what he's done and his history as a wrestler. And so I was very excited. But for him, I don't think he had much experience working with me, but that's kind of the fun of the show, because our sensibilities are very similar. And that's something we identified immediately. Like, the things we kind of enjoy and laugh at are very similar, even if I don't watch any basketball and he watches it religiously. And I have like 2 pairs of shoes, and one of them is scuffed beyond belief because I was in a motorcycle accident where, like, I have these old shoes and I don't need these old shoes, but I still have these old shoes. And he has collections of amazing shoes. And so finding those like common points and hearing his enthusiasm for that make me excited about, shoes, something that I never thought I would be. And then in his case, a lot of the time it's gaming. That's something that it's the world that I'm entrenched in. And so he's the kind of person who only started playing video games like less than a year ago. And he's only ever played one game. And so you want to know what's the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about, like, especially in the first episode. I just recently found out that he bought a second game, and I don't know what it is. And we're going to find out what it is on the show. And so it's that kind of back and forth, that fun kind of like showing and sharing, that I think is going to make the dynamic really good. And also at this point now, we've talked for hours, and we've done a ton of test episodes, which is just he and I just kind of like, shooting shit with each other. And it's great and it's fun. And so I'm not worried about being strangers. And I honestly think that's kind of a draw for the whole show.
Yeah. And, it's kind of interesting because I know a little bit about his sneaker fandom, and I'm looking at, you have the display case behind you, but he probably keeps his sneakers in one too. So
yeah, and I have Power Rangers. So like that's a great example. I have Power Rangers behind me, and something tells me Sky does not have Power Rangers behind him.
You're gonna have to push him into that a little bit. I'm starting slowly. I have wrestling figures and Batman stuff, but just last night I was like, oh, I saw the morpher with like the 5 coins you can put in, and I'm like, maybe I should get that.
Yeah.
And then I was
be
like,
careful.
oh.
It's a slippery slope.
It is.
It's a slippery slope. But if you want my recommendation, we're getting way off topic and I don't want to waste your time. But if you want my recommendation for the apps, if you're going to buy one Megazord, it's probably the best one you can get, and you probably have to get it on eBay, is the Power Rangers Mystic Force Megazord, because it transforms not only into a giant wizard warrior, but also a dragon that the red robot rides on horseback. That's it. All right, back on topic.
I'm sold. No, this is on topic. This is what
okay. Good.
I mean, this is what the show's about. And personally speaking, like, I know I am the wrestling side of things, and that's my job, and it's still an interest. But like most of the time, I would rather talk about everything besides wrestling, because I'm so ingrained in it, and I watch it, I deal with it every day, and this is where the more fun conversations happen. This is where you get more honesty. You don't have to worry about who works where and all that. Like, I mean, this is fun. Like it's finally, wrestling's at a point where you don't have to talk about peeking behind the curtain. Like there is no curtain. It's just kind of, it is what it is. So I think the show's coming along at a perfect time.
That's great. I mean, that's great to hear. Wrestling is obviously a big part of something that I enjoy, and it's an even bigger part of Sky's life. So it's a part of the show, and we would never deny that. But I think there's already a ton of other more comprehensive wrestling podcasts out there that it doesn't make sense for us to try and, bite into any of that pie. There's other people that are doing it way better than we could. But this show is kind of like, it almost feels like subscribing to subreddits in a way, or like the front page of Reddit, where it's like, listen, if you go to Squared Circle enough, it's going to be in there. You're going to log in, something's going to hit the front page, but it's not the only thing. You're not going to spend your whole time there. You're going to get all kinds of other things from other places, and wrestling's a part of it, but so are sneakers, so are Power Rangers, so are any of these other things that happen topically every single week.
Yeah. I mean, even hitting the nail on the head again, driving the point home. You're seeing these influences in people's ring gear. You see people doing Power Rangers tights, and they wrestle in sneakers, or they try to get their wrestling boots look like sneakers. And it's just, I'm glad that we're at a point where, it's cool to be a wrestling fan. It's still kitschy in a way, but at least it's bleeding over into all these other areas, and you can share all of these other different things. Like, I know anime is like, I couldn't tell you one Dragon Ball Z character from the next, and it's just, but you could still talk about it with people, and like, oh, here's what happened, this and this, and they can like tie it into wrestling somehow. And
I was gonna say, my personal hope is that, you were exactly right with stuff like anime, where if you want to get someone into anime, you don't force them to sit down and start watching anime. You just make it something that comes up in conversation naturally, that they're curious about. And I honestly hope that people that don't watch wrestling find this podcast, and it makes them go like, I mean, well, I offhandedly heard about how Sky threw someone through a wall, and I kind of want to watch that clip. So I'll find that clip, and then that clip leads to them watching more, and then they're watching Dynamite every single week. Like, that isn't necessarily an agenda of the show, but like, I think making more fans of that kind of thing is really cool because it happens naturally. It's not forced, you know?
Yeah, and I think you're probably going to have the diehard crowd already just because they're very supportive of the brands that they watch, but it's been a topic of conversation for, I'm going to say, a decade or so, where wrestling needs to draw back in the mainstream crowd, the casual fan, and I think this is the way to do it.
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, I really hope so. I obviously, I would love for this podcast to stand on its own without any of those other things. But I think if anything we touch on in a given week, especially if it's dealing with our personal specific interests like Power Rangers or anime, because I am pretty big into anime as well. I'm a big nerd. I think that would be really cool if that sent anyone down kind of that rabbit hole, and they go, oh, this thing that I didn't think that I would be into I am now into it, you know?
Yeah. So if I have this right, you're originally from North Carolina.
I am. Charlotte, North Carolina.
Are you a Ric Flair guy? Like, where does your wrestling fandom start? Like, do you remember it?
I mean, growing up in North Carolina, wrestling was like an ever-present thing. So like, there's no point where I don't remember watching it on TV. And my dad, who was from New York, but he loved watching, he would go watch wrestling just like as a young man, and kind of shared that with me growing up. So I watched everything when I could, and I would go to house shows when they came through and stuff like that. As far as Ric Flair specifically goes, I have gone through a lot of transitional periods with wrestling. So I basically went Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and it would just trade between the two of them. Was kind of my classic wrestling favorite. And I never truly appreciated Ric Flair. But if you ask me who probably the greatest wrestler of all time is, I would have to at least mention Ric Flair, because his contribution and what he did at the time, you don't see it. For me, I also never marked out, really. Like, I always kind of pulled for the heel, and so I was never like into Hulkamania or any of those things. But I think that what he did with wrestling in terms of making it such a performative thing is undeniable. And then it gives me pride, because then being from Charlotte, I'm like
hometown.
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that. I will firmly say that I was a Shawn Michaels guy, and I probably say RVD in between then, and then Chris Jericho. Like, and I never disliked, I never strongly disliked some of the other guys that were there, but now looking back, I have a new appreciation for what they did. So, you know, I mean, am I putting you on the spot if I ask you for a favorite match, whether it's, you know, from any time watching or just one you saw recently?
I feel like if I did a deep dive, I would probably come back with a couple of them. But when you ask me that, the first thing that came to my mind was Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon, the ladder match. Okay. I feel like I watched it again. I mean, not too recently, I guess within the last couple of years. And I was just like, God, it's an endurance match, but it also has such a great narrative throughout the whole thing. It's just so satisfying to watch. So, yeah.
How about maybe a little bit of an easier or more difficult, depending on how you take it, but favorite Scorpio Sky match?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm sure AEW wants me to say something from AEW, but yeah, I mean, again, I watched him wrestle 2 feet away. And so, I mean, I would say I can't pull one off the top of my head, but I know I've watched him wrestle several times, tag team and singles matches in local wrestling organizations around LA. So like something like that, where it's like, oh my God, he just smashed it. Yeah. He just destroyed a chair right next to me is hard to top. So.
All right. You guys are going to have plenty to get into. Once again, I'm looking forward to the show. Anybody watching this or listening to it, Scorpio Sky and James Willems premieres Wrestling with the Week on Monday, January 18th. Check it out on wherever you listen to podcasts. You guys have a link tree on the socials. Anywhere you want to get it. Looking forward to it, and thanks very much for your time today.
No, thank you. This is great. This is a blast.